Hello, Maya TV. Welcome back for another episode. I'm here with Bob Harper. He's an animator and producer. Bob, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, tell us about yourself and how you got involved in animation.
I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. I moved out here roughly 30 years ago to try to get into the film industry. And I didn't know anything, so I sort of stumbled around and I found a job using my art skills doing licensing products for a lapel pin company in Orange County. And I was there for a few years and I learned, or taught myself flash animation right when the original .com came up, the big industry when they were doing short animations. And I used some of my skills to start animating and fell into the industry that way.
So then you started off kind of learning things on your own, but then you end up working for a fairly big show.
Yes, I got hired at Cartoon Network for Foster Some for Imaginary Friends, which was created by Craig McCracken, who also created Powerpuff Girls. I got brought on to work there originally as a design cleanup artist, and then after a couple of years, I became an animator on the show.
So as you spent time there, and they got to know you and went, okay, he can do this.
Yes.
They gave you more power.
Right, they had sort of an open door policy where you could try to get other jobs or pitch shows, that sort of thing.
Very cool.
So yeah, so I proved myself being a fast cleanup artist that I can also do fast animation, and they promoted me to animator.
Now tell us what being a cleanup artist means.
So in the production pipeline, you have design artists who will draw either traditionally or in digital, sort of sketchy sort of styled characters and backgrounds, and then it gets handed off to cleanup artists who will take it and digitize it either in some vector program, which we were using, which is Adobe Illustrator, or a CG program to get the final look before it goes to the colorist. That's what I did originally.
And then that you did animation. Now, what do you do exactly as an animator? Because I know there were like your position, there were like many different parts. So what is like your job there?
Right, so at Cartoon Network at the time, we all worked with Adobe Flash, which is now Adobe Animate, and we would get the scenes from the storyboard team or the animatic team, and they would have pieces of the storyboard laid out, and then we would take the character puppets or rigs, and we would do puppet style animation along with some traditional animation to get the final look. So we didn't have in-between artists or keyframe artists, we did the whole thing.
And then tell us about what it was like to work on that show, work with these other animators like Craig McCracken, who's very famous in the animation world.
Right. It was a very positive experience. I made lifelong friends there. I got to learn different parts of production. Like I said, I had an open door, so I got to see editing, I got to see design, I got to see color. And working with Craig McCracken was very inspiring. I also got to work on his, I think at the time it was the 10th anniversary Powerpuff Girls animated movie. So it was great to hear his insights. He was very friendly and very gracious and giving us sort of his background and his ideas of animation, and it carried over to what we did. It was very rewarding.
And then from Foster's Home, where did your career go?
So it went all over the place. That was sort of the last era where you had steady work as an animator, so I would bounce at different studios. I worked at Current TV, which was owned by Al Gore's company at the time, on a show called Super News, where I did animation and directed a couple of episodes. And after that, I worked for an educational company and did some odd stuff here and there. I eventually sold a show to DreamWorks TV called Prank Boy. And then as I sold that show, I ended up getting a job as a director, a technical director at Dreamies Pictures, which is a Chinese-owned studio. And we produced 3 seasons of a show for Chinese TV.
Now, what is it like to work for an international animation studio where you're not from that country, you may not know the culture?
Right. It was very challenging at first because we had a team in the U.S. that would do the pre-production work, which would be the design, the storyboards, the scripts, and the voices and the music, and then it would go to a Chinese animation production company, and I would have to interact with that studio and give them direction for what we call retakes. When a scene comes back that isn't working, we had to. So we learned how to communicate via Zoom and other apps. And we also had a time difference, so we had to be either late at night or early in the morning, depending on the time difference. But what was amazing is, I think around the world, animation people sort of speak the same art language. So once you get over the barriers of the actual grammar language, there's an understanding. So it was a very great experience.
Now, you've been involved in the animation industry for a while. How has it changed since you started?
So when I first started as a worker, there were a lot of stable jobs. So for instance, at Cartoon Network, I was there for 5 years on a show. Since then, they've been producing less amounts of shows per season overall, so it would be harder to find a long-standing job. So as a worker, it becomes more challenging over the years because, they're not ordering as many jobs. And also over the years, a lot of jobs have gone to different studios around the world. So there's been a lot less opportunities in the United States for animators. So that's part of it.
So how do animators adjust to all these changes?
So they have to carve their own sort of entrepreneurial path to be freelancers, to be independent producers, to hone their skills and their software knowledge to be more marketable, to try to find the jobs that are out there still. They have to maybe incorporate AI in some sort of way, because that is going to be the future. That's what studios are going to be using. So they need to stay on top of software, but I think personally they should find their own voice and their own style and tell their own stories, because with YouTube and all sorts of possible ways, you can become your own independent producer.
So how do you foresee the future of animation going?
I see it where animators need to develop an audience and produce content that's meaningful to that audience. I feel that the corporations and the bigger studios will still invest in bigger properties, the tent poles, but they're going to scale production and they're going to use AI to replace a lot of jobs. So as a person who wants to animate and be a storyteller, you have to find your own way. You have to find your audience, do something that's unique and different. The creator of Has-Been Hotel, for instance, she was an animator in the studio system, but then she, on her Patreon, got a lot of followers, and she got a Kickstarter to fund her pilot. And it took off, and then A24 came in, and they signed a deal with her, then they sold it to Amazon, and it became the biggest streaming animated show for Amazon ever. So, but she did that for herself, the original pilot, the ideas. That's how I see the future going for independent animators.
So what projects are you working on right now?
I'm working on a few things that I can't talk about, but the one I can talk about that I'm most passionate about is I'm a consulting producer for a studio called Brainstorm Productions. And it is a studio in Torrance, compiled of neurodiverse animators. Most of them are on the autism spectrum. And we have what's called a partial day program. So they come into the training academy that we provide 3 years of training in software and fundamentals in animation. And then they get invited to get hired at the actual studio that we run. And once they're at the studio, they work on a variety of projects. And the big project that's coming up is in April, on April 9th, in celebration of Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. We are premiering what's called the Dreams Anthology. And it's 9 short films that are strung together under the theme of dreams. And each one of the short films were written, directed, and produced by these neurodivergent animators. And I got to oversee that production, and it's been very rewarding.
I can't wait to see it. So why is this project so important to you?
I have a son who's on the autism spectrum, and so it's near and dear to me. This topic. Also, when you've been in the industry as long as I have, which has been about 30 years, you tend to get a little jaded. Everything seems to be the same. You get a little burnout on the industry. I see the passion in the eyes of these young animators, and it's kind of brought back my passion for it. So I'm very, very dedicated to this program, to these individuals. They're all very exciting.
So what would your advice be to young animators getting into the business now?
I would say diversify your skills. Used to, you would specialize in either being a storyboard artist or a character designer or a background designer. You need to kind of know a little bit about everything. Learn as much software. Decide on your own choice if you want to use AI to enhance your workflow. And promote yourself. You have to let everyone know, like if you are available to work, go on sites like Fiverr and LinkedIn and let people know, keep showing more new stuff, produce your own content, whether it's a short film or a web series, and get it out there as you're also developing your portfolio, and network with people. A lot of animators are very reserved. Get out there and let people know who you are and what you can do, and team up with other animators and produce something bigger. The Academy Award winning animated Oscar went to Flow, which was an independent film that, didn't cost near as much as the big films cost. And even the live action film was only a $5 million film. So independent creators can create something profoundly with not a huge budget compared to the studios.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, for being here, for sharing your experience with us. Where can... well, actually, I wanted to ask on the topic of, you mentioned how well Flow did, how well all these films are doing. Do you think that tells you something about where the animation field is going?
Yeah, actually, there's been a trend I've noticed. A lot of companies worldwide are now producing feature films and animation, because series and episodic content is harder to sell. Because to get funding to do, say, 26 episodes for a season is much harder. It's also harder to find a place, whereas you could probably fund an indie animated film now for a fraction of the cost of the studios, and you have multiple areas of distribution. You have all the streamers, you have theatrical still, whether it's through festivals or what have you, and you have YouTube and other places that you can post it yourself. You can actually post on Amazon Prime yourself. So I think that Flow has shown that you don't have to have hundreds of millions of dollars to create something that's worthy of attention, and that's hopeful for the independent animator, and that should be how it goes.
And then how do these changes in how films are displayed, how does that change the animator's work?
Sometimes you have to think, a lot of the screens are smaller screens, so you have to make sure what you're producing could be seen on a smaller screen. And also the audiences, tend to be more, or harder to keep their attention, the younger audiences, so if you're doing something that's going to be short, keep it short enough that your audience, won't go away from it. So that's part of the challenge of modern audiences, and also on the small screen, that it's not the surround sound theater that we all dream to be a part of.
And then are there any animators working right now that you admire and look forward to seeing how they develop?
I don't know specific animators. I know shows that I like. There's a show on Adult Swim now called Common Side Effects, and it was executive produced by Mike Judge. It's very intriguing. It's not a typical adult comedy. It's actually, there's a lot of drama to it. It has a very unique style, and I feel like that's one thing streaming has been good. There's been a broadening of styles and types of stories are being told and types of audiences to go for. Arcane, swept the Annie Awards, and that's such a different type of show that would normally have been produced years ago. It's also based on a video game. That would be another thing. Animators should look beyond just animation. They should do books, they should do their own games, other ways of getting what they call intellectual property put together that would make it attractive to a streamer, someone to acquire it for an animated series.
And then traditionally, animation, a lot of people is viewed as like, this is for children, but I know there are a lot of developments in adult animation.
Yes. It used to even be called just a genre, which is not the case. South Park isn't for little kids. Arcane isn't for little kids. A lot of anime from Japan is definitely not for little kids, and that's really starting to, I think, get more and more into the world culture. And also, I believe, my generation and younger, we kind of grew up on animation, didn't want to outgrow it, so we're a more receptive audience as an adult to watching something that's animated because we know it can be more than just for kids. So yeah, it's definitely not for just for kids anymore.
And do you think the audiences have changed? Like what they want from animation is different now?
I believe so. I think you know, there's little room for bad animation. Used to, when I was younger, you could have a lot of shows that were badly animated and you would just take it because it was cartoons. Now I think the audiences are more discerning and more critical of something. You know, if it's supposed to be stylistic, like South Park is supposed to look kind of bad, but you know, you can't have like an anime now that's really just kind of cheap looking. You know, with what's been pushed out there, the boundaries have been pushed, and I think the audiences want more. And also, the same for storytelling and for like representation. People want to see more kinds of stories now, not just the traditional, let's sell a toy type of story, which used to be the norm. So yeah, audience have evolved for the better, I think, overall. And if you see animation now, it's like looking better than it has over the years.
And now, where could our audience find out more about you and the work that you do?
If you go to brainstormproductions.org, you can find all about our studio and what we're working on, and that's the majority of my time and my passion. You can find me at bigbobharper.com and see what personal things I'm working on. There's not much right now because I'm dedicated to the studio, and that's hopefully they'll keep going.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for being with us. Please, audience, look into his work, support him, and stay tuned because we have a lot of great episodes coming up. Bye.
Bye.